Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. There was a recent incident of a man throwing a dog from a bridge into a lake just because he wanted to shoot a video. There have been other cases of reports as well where we have inflicted sexual abuse on animals, acid attacked them, we have thrown dogs from the rooftops and even burned them alive as well. Such is the case of brutality that we have inflicted on the animals. Now the question is, do we have no laws to stop such cruelty being inflicted on the animals? Yes, we do have the law, and that law is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. What is this law all about? In spite of this law being present, why is that there have been increasing cases of cruelty against the animals? That is because this law, when you look at its punishment, it has been ineffective in curbing the menace of these criminal acts. Let's try and understand what is the issue with respect to the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. First, we have to understand what is treating animal cruelly means. This is defined under section 11 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. So what is this definition all about? It says in case we are beating, kicking, overriding, overdriving, overloading, torturing or otherwise treating any animal so as to subject it to unnecessary pain or suffering, willfully and unreasonably administering any injurious drug or an injurious substance, transporting, confining or chaining an animal, causing it suffering, denying it water and food, mutilating it, killing an animal, including the stray dogs, by using the method of steroid injections in the heart or in any other unnecessarily cruel manner, that will fall under the cruelty to the animals. When this particular cruelty is inflicted on the animals and when there is barbaric in nature, what we will have is the license to put this person under the penological principles as defined under this act. So what is the punishment that is present under this act? As per 1960 Act, a first offence is punishable with a fine which shall not be less than 10 rupees. Now you know why this law is ineffective. That is because when it is committed for the first time, the fine is at 10 rupees and it can also extend to about 50 rupees as well. In the second case or in the subsequent offence committed within 3 years of the previous offence, there will be a fine which will start with 25 rupees and it may extend to 100 rupees as well. It also says that there will be an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 months or with both as well. But imprisonment under this particular act has no statistics whatsoever when it comes to this implementation. So what is that we have to understand? The punishment is very liberal. It has a fine and people usually commit this horrific act. They pay this fine from 50 to 100 whatsoever and they have no punishment because this particular data is not recorded. Even if he commits the act for the second time, because there has been no previous data recorded by the police officers or by the Animal Welfare Board of India, such is the case where these people are walking scot-free, not having any remorse whatsoever. We have another section in the Indian Penal Code, which is section 429. It speaks about mischief by killing or maiming the cattle, etc., of any value or any animal of value of 50 rupees. So whoever commits the mischief by killing, poisoning, maiming or rendering useless any elephant, camel, horse, mule, buffalo, bull, cow or ox, whatever may be the value, or any other animal of the value of 50 rupees or upwards, shall be punished with an imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 5 years or with fine or both. This is also another section that we have in the Indian Penal Code. Now let's get back to the first incident. What was the first incident? We did discuss that there was a man who threw a dog from the bridge into the lake just for shooting a video. Can we apply this principle or this section of Indian Penal Code? No. Why? Because it speaks about killing, it speaks about poisoning, it speaks about maiming, or it speaks about rendering useless. But we do not care if this dog was pushed into the lake just for for shooting a video. So he would not be culpable under section 429 of the Indian Penal Code. So should we reframe laws such that in case there is any brutality that is inflicted on these animals, such people will head to the prisons. In fact, offences under section 429 are also bailable as well. You have something called as Schedule 1 in the CRPC. This defines whether a section in the Indian Penal Code is cognizable or non-cognizable, whether it is bailable or non-bailable. So section 429 of the Indian Penal Code simply says that this particular section is bailable. So these people, even if they go to the prison, they will be out in seconds. Why? Because this is a bailable offense. So they have been conducting such an activity and they have been given bails by the court of law as well. In fact, we do not have the official data and statistics when it comes to crimes against the animals. Animal NGOs as well as activists try to tackle this particular case with their own abilities and limitations, but because the law does not support them, because the law has been inept, because the law has become useless in stopping this particular crime, we have to look at reformation, says this article. What are the other issues surrounding this Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act? When we look at the definition under section 11, we have something called as unnecessary pain or suffering. What is this unnecessary pain or suffering is not defined in this act. So in case there is a person who commits this particular crime, he goes to the court of law. The court of law does not have an objective definition. Since it does not have an objective definition, judges on their own interpret on a different level on a subjective basis, and such people might not also be culpable in this particular case. So what we require is an objective definition rather than the subjective bias of the judges is the first major issue. Then we have section 11, which speaks about criminalizing certain forms of animal cruelty, but there are exceptions in subclause 3 as well. So what are these exceptions? This includes dehorning, castration, nose roping as well as branding. While all this is being done, there is huge pain that the animal goes through because there are no procedures how it has to be done. Again, animals are the major sufferers. When it comes to dehorning, we have number of people who use hot irons, knives and wires to simply remove the horns as well. When it comes to nose roping, they pierce the animal's nasal septa using a thick blunt needle as well. When it comes to branding, it is traditionally known by applying a hot iron directly onto the animal's skin as well. Why? Because this is done for identification. So while all this means there is still brutality and there is lack of procedure. Because there is lack of procedure, because there is no scientific basis as to how this has to be conducted, there is again pain inflicted on the animals. In fact, when you look at the parliament, it has brought a number of bills in the past. There have been social media campaigns. There have been petitions even before the Supreme Court of India seeking for a stricter punishment for those people who have been abusing the animals. But this has no value as well. Why? Because there was another landmark judgment given by the Supreme Court of India with respect to Animal Welfare Board of India versus A. Nagaraja and others. According to this particular order given by the Supreme Court, it had also recommended and asked the legislature to bring changes within this particular law, increase the punishment as well as penalties with respect to this act, but this has not been identified by the legislature and still we have these lame inept laws, says the author of this article. At present, a majority of these acts are still non-cognizable, which means this cannot be directly taken up by the police officers. So what is a cognizable offense? This will not require the permission from the magistrate. So the police in fact will directly approach that person who's committed the crime, and in case it is a cognizable offense, they can directly arrest that person without any warrant. But since it is a non-cognizable offense, this will also require the permission from the magistrate as well. And when such things happen, it facilitates police inaction and it also ensures that most of the culprits who have inflicted this pain go scot-free when it comes to these issues. So what is the way forward when it comes to this particular issue? We have to understand that all these wordings that are present in this particular act with reference to unnecessary pain and suffering, this has to be defined. Why? Because when there is no definition, they go to the court of law and this becomes a subjective interpretation, and these people will walk scot free. So what we require is increasing this particular penalty, increasing the punishment as well, and increasing the severity as well. Let's say he's committing the crime for the first time, increase the penalty to about 10,000 or more than that, and in case he's committing for the second time, it has to be more than 1 lakh. So increase the severity as and when it happens, and the punishment will also have to be increased progressively, says the author of this article. Another important factor from your preliminary examination point of view is about Animal Welfare Board of India. It is a statutory advisory body on animal welfare laws and promotes animal welfare in the country. It was established in 1962 under Section 4 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. Kindly remember, from your preliminary examination point of view, it can be important. It is headquartered at Balabgarh in Haryana. So kindly remember these key facts for your preliminary examination. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, reject this inequitable climate proposal. We had a recent meeting where the United Nations Secretary General gave a call to India. He says that India will have to give up on coal. All the investments that it is making with respect to the thermal energy will have to be reduced, and no new investment in coal should happen after 2020. In order to make sure that this is also applied to other countries as well, he brings an argument that G20 countries should also implement and they should not be using coal. But what we have to understand is that this particular statement violates some of the very foundations of the issue of climate change. Why? Because we have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It basically makes sure that there is differentiation of what is called as the developed country and what is called as the developing country. Why? Because historically it is the developed country which have abused the planet Earth. It is the developed country which had increased the emissions. They were already developed, and it is now that the developing countries are improving. So what we have is common but differentiation. So this differentiation is in the form of developed countries and developing countries. You can't juxtapose them together and ask them to apply all the principles of climate change on a similar weighing stage. That is because this particular countries of developed countries have historically abused the earth. They have already developed, but the developing countries are now developing, so you can't weigh them equally, is what is the foundational principles of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. But when the United Nations Secretary General says that all the G20 countries will have to be weighed equally, that is the violation of this very foundation. So what we have to understand is this statement made by the United Nations General Secretary was trying to put pressure on India, and he was also bringing in China as well, where he says that they have to reduce their emissions by 45% by the year 2030 on power with the developed countries. This statement was made in spite of India being the lowest per capita income country. But India is working much beyond its capacity to make sure that it is controlling its climate change issues. What are the steps taken by India when it comes to mitigating the impact of climate change? India has taken number of steps when it comes to reducing the impact of climate change. What has been the India's track record? It has its renewable energy program. This includes number of programs initiated by the government of India and steps also being taken by the state governments as well. We have what is called as the Kusum program. So what is this? This is for promoting decentralized solar production. Then we have something called as the 60 program, which will incentivize the installation of rooftop solar projects in India. These two programs are with reference to the solar sector. Then we also have the National Offshore Wind Energy Policy, which is speaking about the wind energy sector. So such is the mechanisms and measures taken by India when it comes to the renewable energy and also mitigating the impact of climate change. India is also one of the few countries which has taken the climate action plan where it is complying by 2 degrees Celsius warming compliance. India has also been one of the few countries which is implementing the Paris Agreement as well. But we have United States of America which has withdrawn from this particular agreement and is not complying by the rules of climate change. India is also a country which is aspiring to become a model when it comes to the economic growth. So it is increasing its economic productivity, it is increasing its developmental protocols as well. In spite of this economic growth, India's annual emissions is at 0.5 tons per capita, and this is way below the global average of 1.3 tons of emission. But when you look at other countries like United States of America, China and European Union, the three leading emitters in absolute terms, their per capita emissions are higher than this average. So why bring India into picture and ask India to reduce the coal production is the first major question. And when it comes to the cumulative emissions, on the basis of which there is increase of the temperature, India had only contributed to about 4% for a population of 1.3 billion. Now you compare this population to the European Union. European Union has a population of about 448 million. But how much has it contributed on a cumulative basis? It is about 20%. So when it comes to the cumulative emissions, India has contributed only 4%, but the European Union has contributed more than 20% for a very less population. These are the steps taken by India in order to mitigate the issues of climate change. Now let's look at some of the steps taken by the developed countries. The developed countries, when you consider the period from 1990, the developed nations have reduced their annual emissions by only 1.3%. When you look into the statistics era and the calculations era, it is close by to null, or in fact it is close to zero as well. You have number of countries in European Union, and there are other countries which is requesting the developing country to phase out the coal as well. But these countries in European Union are still using oil, they are still using gases, they are still using other dependency of natural gases as well. This also creates pollution. But why focus only on coal when it comes to the developing sector is the question asked by the author. So what is that we have to understand? Why are these countries focusing on the developing countries? That is because of lack of political support in the domestic front in all the developed countries. Let's take the example of United States of America. United States of America still believes that there is no climate change. Trump in fact says that climate change is a hoax as well. There have been industrial lobbying groups which is also resisting from creating an impression of climate change as well. So because they have no internal political support, because they have their industrial lobbying groups which are very strong, which does not want to acknowledge the persistence of this climate change, that is why they want to put pressure on some other country, and that is in the form of developing nations. So what are they doing here? They are diverting the attention from the developed countries to the developing countries. Ideally, the developed countries should have taken the responsibility to mitigate the climate change issues as well, but they are not doing it, but instead they are diverting their attention towards the developing countries like India, says the author of this article. How are they able to do it? That is by constantly bombarding the facts and putting the entire onus on the developing country. How do they do it? They demonize the coal mining. They also say that coal-based power generation is a problem to the climate change, and that is increasing the temperature, says the developed countries. The developed countries also do not want the developing countries or the third world countries to touch the forest areas or pollute the ocean water. Why? Because only when there are forests in these developing countries, it is able to act as the carbon sink. In case these forests are also destroyed, they would not be able to act as the carbon sink, and the entire world becomes the sufferer. So what do they want? They want the developing countries to keep their forests intact, but they do not want to adapt the same principle when it comes to their forests as well as their oceans as well. Such is the hypocrisy of the developed countries, says the author of this article. To to bring all this into practice, to make sure that there is no industrialization in such areas, and to make sure that there is degrowth in this particular area, what do? They make use of all the international organizations. Let's say, for example, we have the international organization like the World Bank. In case there is a third country or there is a developing country which is requesting for a loan, the terms and conditions are not to disturb the forest and the oceanic region, and also to force the developed country's agenda onto the developing country. So what do? In case there are countries which are not complying by it, in case they ask for a loan in the near future, these countries force their agenda onto the developing countries. So the United Nations Secretary General has used this particular strategy to impose this particular idea of not to use coal in India. They don't question the United States of America as to why they have withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. They don't ask the EU countries why they are still using the oil and natural gas, but they focus on the developing countries like India, and they ask us not to use coal or invest in the coal energy. Now let's for a moment assume that India is not investing in the coal sector. India does not have the thermal energy as well. But can India also get its energy from other sources? That is impossible, says the author of this article. Why? Let's say if you are depending entirely on the renewable energy sector, this renewable energy sector and its energy produced by the renewable sector can only be used for the household consumption, and to a limited extent it can also be used in the service sector as well. So all the energy that which is derived from the renewable energy is useful only for the household and the service sector, but for the manufacturing sector we still require the coal and the thermal sector. So in case India wants to suspend the production of energy from this thermal and coal sector, that is impossible, says the author of this article. Let's assume hypothetically, if we have to increase the share of renewable energy in India, we require advancement in technology. Why? That is because we have to improvise on conversion as well. Let's say we have to convert the solar energy into electric energy or wind energy into electrical energy. This requires advancement in the technology, for which what we require is R&D, what we require is investment in tools and technology. But we have one of the accords called as the Copenhagen Accord. It signaled the end of legally binding commitments to emissions reduction when it comes to the developed country. Because they are not legally bound to this commitment, the developed countries will not invest on the R&D, will not make any investment in the technology. So where do we get all these efficient technology tools is the question that we need to ponder. Therefore, lacking the production capacity in renewable energy technologies and its operations, it will expose India to severe dependence on the foreign countries as well as external sources and supply chains. Looking into all these arguments, implementing a 45% reduction in emission is tough and impossible. In fact, India should also reject the advice of United Nations Secretary General, reiterate its long-standing commitment to equitable response to challenge of global warming. So what it should say, the United Nations Secretary General, is that we all have common but differentiated responsibilities, and that is what India will comply by. So we have to still bifurcate the developed countries and developing countries into different zones, and the developed countries will still have to take the responsibility for the historic emissions, historical mistakes that they have committed is what needs to be reiterated by India, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says special benches to hear cases against legislators. What is the context? It is speaking about criminalization of politics. We have number of MLAs as well as MPs who have number of cases against them. It can be criminal cases, it can be cases with respect to the Prevention of Corruption Act, or it can be cases with respect to Prevention of Money Laundering Act as well. In order to make sure that we do not have criminals in the legislation, that is why the Supreme Court of India has requested all the high courts to head the special benches and immediately hear the long pending criminal cases against the sitting and former legislators. Let's look at some of the statistics as given under this article. We have over 4,400 criminal trials which have been held up, some for the decades because the MPs and the MLAs are so powerful. They have a very good advocate group as well, and they make sure that it does not cross the trial stage of a criminal case. Then we also have about 2500 criminal cases against the sitting legislators alone in India. So how do we overcome this issue? That is where the Supreme Court of India has requested the Chief Justice of all the High Courts to come up with an action plan. So what is this action plan? List out all the cases that you have with respect to the member of parliament or with respect to the member of legislative assembly. You give us within what time that you will have to conduct these particular proceedings and end this particular case within a suitable period of time, for which what you require is an action plan. So initiate such an action plan, list all the cases, and ultimately conclude this particular case, says the Supreme Court of India. So the Chief Justice is requesting the Chief Justice of the High Courts to come up with an action plan, come up with special courts that is required, the infrastructure that is required, the number of judges that is required to make sure that all these piled up cases from the last decade or so are concluded, so that the criminals who are in the legislatures are immediately removed from the legislatures. It is what we have to understand with respect to this article. But with respect to criminalization of politics, we have been discussing in the past 1 month, so kindly look into our past CNS. Now let's look into our next article. This article here is speaking about protests initiated by the farmers. Why? Because the Lok Sabha has introduced two important bills. One is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill of 2020. The other is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price. What is the first bill all about? We have the farmers who were earlier selling their agricultural produce only to the APMC mandis. Now this has been opened up and the farmers would be able to sell their product to anyone as well, whether it can be interstate or it can be intrastate as well. The second is about contract farming. Let's say if the farmer has entered into a contract with an agribusiness firm or with an MNC or with an exporter or a large retailer, he would be able to sell this particular agricultural product with the already existing partner whom he has entered into a contract with. What is the advantage of it? Now, because the farmer would be able to sell it to anyone in the first bill, and because he has entered into a contract in the second bill, he would be able to get competitive pricing. In the previous one, what we had is the APMC mandi, and they were regulating the prices and he was getting only suitable prices, but you had the brokers who were taking away maximum money. That is not present in this particular initiative, but the farmers also sense that this might be a major issue for the farmers. Why? That is because they sense that there will be a dilution of this particular law with respect to the minimum support price. So the government is currently procuring these agricultural commodities. It is also providing the farmers what is called as the minimum support price. But with the introduction of the first bill, what they sense is that minimum support price might not be given by the government, and at the same time farmers also fear they no longer get paid at the MSP, while the commission agents also fear they will lose their commission. Why? Because in APMC mandis they were getting the commission and now they might not get the commission, and at the same time the center is also overstepping the jurisdiction, says the opposition political parties. Why? That is because agriculture, when you look into it, it is currently into the state list. So why is the central government fiddling with what is in the state list, is what the opposition political parties are also calling at. Then we also have to look at the government stand as well. According to the government stand, they have clearly specified that MSP will continue to remain in the future, APMC acts would continue to remain in force, and farmers are free to sell in mandis or anywhere that they want. So the farmers would be able to give their product to the APMCs or they can give it to anyone as well. So the bill will give the farmers more choices, more competition to their produce, leading to remunerative prices, improved infrastructure and services, is what this article all about. An elaborate analysis once again will be taken up in our economy this week, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about basic exchange and cooperation agreement. We have to understand what is this agreement all about. Apart from this, there are some foundation agreements as well. This includes logistic exchange memorandum agreement. It includes the communication compatibility and security Agreement called as COMCOSA. Then we also have General Security of Military Information Agreement called as GSOMIA. All this has been discussed in one of our videos, so we will give the link in the description box, so kindly look into it. Our focus today will only be on Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. So what is this all about? This is about exchanging the geospatial information. This is about giving the satellite images to India as well. What happens is you have the GPS through which we would be able to connect world over. According to the satellite communication statistics, United States of America has the largest number of satellites when it comes to the world picture. So what happens? Let's say for example, this Basic Exchange and Cooperative Agreement can also be used both for the military purposes and it can also be used for the civilian purposes as well. How is that it will be employed for the military purposes? Let's say for example, we have our militaries that is striking at the Ladakh region. So what happens? Let's say this is the Ladakh region. There is some mobilization of the Chinese forces and there is large number of truck that also comes up. They also bring in tankers as well. So India might not know in this particular point, because United States of America has largest number of satellites in the space, they would be acting as the vigilant eyes. They will give this information to the Indian security personnel. So in case there is mobilization, the satellites start viewing it, they will capture these images and they will start giving all the information to the security forces through this Basic Exchange and Cooperative Agreement. So this can be used militarily. How? When there is mobilization of the forces or when there is nuclear activity that is being conducted, the views of the satellite will be captured and the same will be given to that particular country which United States of America has signed this particular agreement. Apart from this, it can also be used in the civilian purpose as well. What is the civilian purpose? Let's say for example, there is the cyclones, or let's say for example, there are other weather related issues or drought issues. This will also be captured by the United States of America satellite and the same information will be given to the administrative bodies in India. So the administrative bodies would be able to take certain measures so that this can be mitigated. It is this that we have to understand. But for the other three, the link for the same will also be provided. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements with respect to Pradhana Mantri Awas Yojana Housing for All urban program. It will be implemented as centrally sponsored scheme including the credit link subsidy. The houses constructed, acquired with central assistance under the mission should be in the name of female head of the household only. Which of the above statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer is both. Why are both the statements wrong? That is because the credit link subsidy is not a centrally sponsored scheme, but instead it is a central sector scheme where the entire onus is on the central government. Why is the second statement wrong? That is because in most of the cases it will be in the female head of the household's name, but it can also be in the joint name of the male head of the household and his wife as well. But in case there is no wife, in case there is no woman in that house, in such a scenario it will also be in the name of the male member as well. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Sambar Lake, which of the following statements is or correct? It is India's largest inland salt lake. It is the source of most of Rajasthan's salt production. Samba has been designated as a Ramsar site. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember the location as well and all these important statistics when it comes to your examination. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are part of G4 nations? Argentina, Brazil, Germany, India, Italy, Japan and Saudi Arabia. The answer to this is 2, 3, 4 and 6. This includes Brazil, Germany, India as well as Japan. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Operation Polo was associated with, is it annexing the Hyderabad state into Indian Union, freedom of Goa, Indian military's capture of majority of Siachen Glacier, or the operations by the Indian peacekeeping force to take control of Jaffna from LTT? The answer to this is annexing the Hyderabad state into Indian Union. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference of Hyderabad Liberation Day, which was on September December 17th. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statement is or correct about Raja Ravi Verma? He is considered among the first Indian artists to use oil paints. This is right. Verma is known for having mastered the reproduction of his work on lithographic press. This is also right. In 2013, a crater on the moon was named in his honor. This is a wrong statement. So the answer to this is 1 and 2. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is not a crater on the moon, but instead it is on planet Mercury. Verma has worked on both portrait and landscape paintings and is considered among the first Indian artists to use oil paints. What do we mean by lithographic press? This is a method where printing does take place on the principle that oil and water do not mix. Now let's look into the next practice question. The religion of early Vedic Aryans was primarily of, is it bhakti? No. Image worship and yagnas? No. It is worship of nature and yagnas. So the answer to this is C. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act needs reconsideration if India is to develop a meaningful animal rights regime. Examine. Next question. India must reiterate its long-standing commitment to climate justice by demanding that rich historic emitters shoulder a substantially high share of burden to mitigate climate change and to avoid climate catastrophe. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.